We're now joined by Rick Grenell, Senior Advisor for National Security and Foreign Policy. And we just broke down, Rick, all of what's happening in Turkey and maybe a move that was kind of unexpected in some ways for a lot of us that made me think of Turkey differently, or maybe this is a good move because in my last 20 years, I didn't really think a President Erdogan could not be a thing. It just felt like that was a foregone conclusion. But now we're seeing it being pushed to a runoff in Turkey. And I was curious from your point of view, obviously this is your expertise. One, could he actually be defeated? And what does this mean on a global scale?
Well, first of all, I've written a piece on the elections in Turkey for the California Globe. I think it's important that we understand that the U.S. media and much of the Western media is trying once again to make everything way too simple. And they're trying to make one villain and one angel out of the election in Turkey. And let's be clear. I understand that Erdogan is not a perfect person and that he's got his flaws and certainly has not been a good, consistent NATO ally. We want him to be better, but this is an extremely complicated election. Erdogan controls the media in Turkey, much like Joe Biden and the Democrats control the media in America. We can't be waving our finger about election interference and fraud when our Secretary of State, literally 3 weeks before our own election, helped manipulate the election through a phony fake letter about Hunter Biden's laptop. I'll also say this is that KK, who is the opposition candidate in Turkey, is been reaching out to the Chinese and making clear that he wants to have an expanded relationship with the Chinese. This is not all black and white. I can't imagine that after this first round of the election where Erdogan won 49.1% of the vote, that in the runoff, he doesn't win. The opposition candidate, KK, as he's called, is running around 45%. It's an uphill battle for the opposition, and I think that Erdogan will probably pull it out.
Rick, you mentioned that the opposition candidate was looking to strengthen ties with the Chinese. We know that Erdogan has strong ties with Russia and has been on the Russian side as far as the war in Ukraine goes, even though they are a NATO ally. My question here is, does that speak more to the failure of leadership of the Biden administration, that we're not talking about one candidate that wants to be closer to the United States and one candidate that wants to be closer to our adversaries? Instead, it's one candidate wants to go with one adversary and the other wants to go with a different adversary. It's as though our NATO ally is picking between two adversaries of who they want to strengthen their ties with.
Look, this is a complicated issue, and I can't make it black and white. And so for the sake of today's discussion, I'm sure that there's going to be a whole bunch of people that attack me by saying, hey, he's pro-Erdogan, which I'm not. I'm trying to call balls and strikes. But let's be clear about one thing. Erdogan has stood up to Putin. He is one guy that has been able to say to Putin, no, you're not going to do this or that. He's standing up for Turkey. Look, I don't like every policy that Erdogan puts forward. He's fighting for Turkey. He's moving this tradition of being a secularist away, and he's moving it towards really too much of a religious context when it comes to the Turkish government. I think Ataturk would be horrified at some of the things that Erdogan is doing. Erdogan has been highly anti-Israel, so that's problematic. But it's not black and white. We have to understand that Turkey's been a member of NATO since 1952. If the people of Turkey choose Erdogan, then we have to work with him. It's not all pretty. And I don't like the fact that the U.S. Ambassador Jeff Flake, former senator from Arizona, was meeting with the opposition, too soon before an election. I don't like that. I think that we should deal with the government that the people of Turkey or any other country elect. We should not be weighing in and trying to manipulate elections. We have our own problems with our elections, and sure, we're in no position to be moralizing about clean and fair elections anymore. I mean, Secretary of State Blinken has ruined that for us.
It does seem like that we are very quick, especially in the media standpoint, to pick a hero and a villain, as you said, to go, here's the good guy, here's the bad guy. Everyone believe it until inevitably something comes out and we're like, oh, it's not as clean cut as you'd like it to be. It's not unlike the situation in Ukraine where it's like, it's not as clean as it was made out to be in the initial thoughts of this is the good, this is the bad. It gets a little foggy whenever you're dealing with other countries, by the way, that don't exactly hold up your same values or your same morals. And we deal with that even with our own space. You also have a situation in Turkey where Erdogan has a pretty decent amount of control over the media, and you have to live with that in the same way. That's not dissimilar to what happens here. It's not dissimilar to what happens in the world of the United States in the way that the Biden administration has a bit of a stranglehold also on the media.
Washington, D.C. and the Democrats that control Washington, D.C. are the last people that should be wagging their finger or giving lectures to other countries about media. I mean, you just played Christiane Amanpour on CNN. She is a totally bought and paid for Democrat, married to a Democrat activist who absolutely is always for liberal policies. She propped up Merkel and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and everything that Merkel stood for. And in my opinion, really created the conditions for Putin to launch the war in Ukraine. Now she's against Putin and the war in Ukraine after really giving aid and comfort to the whole policies that brought us to this point. And now she's attacking, Erdogan. And look, again, I'm very clear-eyed about Erdogan's problems. But this is not a black and white issue. And we could go on and on. I could give you examples of how Erdogan stood up against Putin in Syria, which is his neighbor. It's right there next to Turkey. It's a complicated issue that, we were working with the Russians in Syria. We were trying to get the Russians to block the Iranians, and the Turks were helping us. This is not a black and white issue. And shame on the U.S. media for trying to always make one villain and one hero out of every situation.
Happened at CNN. We're seeing the ramifications of that right now in terms of our own politics. Obviously, if you saw, I'm sure you did, but people who are watching the town hall with President Trump, massive ratings, and then the biggest maybe decline in the history of the network because you not only spent 2 hours, or not even that, was like an hour and 15 minutes, trying to paint someone as a villain when the crowd clearly didn't get on board with that. And then you saw the sharpest decline in maybe the ratings history, and you work with Newsmax. We had Newsmax beating CNN in the ratings the following week. Now we're seeing massive shakeups at CNN and at Fox once again. A huge change in the media landscape because the viewership is demanding it. And hopefully that will continue. The viewers will demand something better.
Look, one of the reasons I love being on ACLJ is that we get long conversations. It's not a quick soundbite. We get these chances to really talk about issues in detail, and I think the audience is hungry for information, and there is a sense that the consumers of media, of information, the consumers of information have a responsibility to go and find different sources. You can't just get one source. You shouldn't just get your news from ACLJ, for instance. You've got to reach out and find a whole bunch of different information so that you understand the complicated and broad truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, your kids are doing that, by the way, and your grandkids are doing that if you're watching, you're older. My kids, just think of the entertainment options. We were talking about this the other day. It was just a very casual conversation about how you could have these things that were just massive and that every kid watched the same television show and every parent grew up watching. That's not the world we live in now. And some of these people on Rumble or on YouTube have millions of people watching their broadcasts or their programming, their videos every day. And then you go to the next house over and that kid's never heard of them or that parent's never heard of them because they have their own silo of content that they are getting. We don't live in this world. And I think you're right. For the viewers who watch, maybe they've just been programmed to say, okay, I put on Fox and I watch the 5-hour block. I put on wherever. You need to start looking at other options, not just about Fox. We like Fox. I like what they're doing there. I think they've made some good work. But people are finding, new ways to kind of experience the world, if you will, through their content.
That's right. And someone on YouTube actually just said, getting good information is our responsibility. As conservatives, we talk about individual responsibility so often. And sometimes we forget that plays out in every aspect of our life, even of how we inform ourselves. And that's why at ACLJ, we try to bring these stories that sometimes aren't even focused on, because we want to provide another outlet for people to be able to reach out And it's also a way that people can be involved by supporting the organization to make sure that different views, different media is put out there to combat against a lot of the lies that we're seeing in the mainstream.
Rick, thanks so much for joining us as always. And we'll check in back with you later this week or next week. Always an interesting conversation. I appreciate it.